Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Reframing Eye Care podcast. This podcast will be talking about the latest innovations in the presbyopia space. We'll explore how innovative drops are revolutionizing the way we manage and treat presbyopia, empowering our patients to see clearly in a much different way. Today's guest is Marc Odrich. He is the Chief Medical Officer of LENZ Therapeutics. He has decades of experience in private practice, teaching, medical research, and contributes to LENZ Therapeutics' success by driving clinical trial and approval of their novel products. In addition to his duties as Chief Medical Officer, he is an Associate Professor of Ophthalmology, University of Virginia, where he practices and teaches clinical ophthalmology and specializes in refractive care and ocular surface disease. Welcome, Marc.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the podcast to talk about the latest news from LENZ Therapeutics. I know they just had a new phase 3 study. How does Aceclidine differ from pilocarpine as a miotic? I know there's a lot of, buzz around the new phase 3 studies.
Yeah, so a pilocarpine really is a very good pressure-lowering drop because it's a miotic, but it also pulls at the ciliary muscle, which opens the trabecular meshwork and lowers the pressure. Aceclidine is a miotic that really doesn't do very much with the ciliary muscle. And because of that, it really has very little effect on both pressure lowering, but also some of the other side effects that you see with both pilocarpine and carbachol. So this particular miotic is really a very pupil selective miotic, and it functions by causing pupillary constriction with almost no action on the ciliary muscle. It's been around for a long time in Europe. It was used for decades as a third choice when we didn't have other agents for pressure lowering throughout Europe. So it's a well-known drug in Europe, but it was never really used as a pure miotic, which is what we're using it for.
Great. So why is Aceclidine a new chemical entity in the U.S.? Why haven't we seen it here?
Great question. So in the 70s, actually 72, one of the doctors at Wills was looking at pilocarpine, carbachol, and Aceclidine. And he really wrote a very important paper that said, hey, if you have pilocarpine and carbachol, there's really no need to have Aceclidine. And so Aceclidine was never brought into the U.S. It was never approved for use. And it has subsequently kind of fallen off everybody's radar. So I think that that's a really interesting issue because it means in the U.S. we are, in fact, now a new chemical entity. And that means we have to go through a pretty extensive clinical trial, which we've just completed, to make sure that it's safe and effective, and we can describe the action of this drug in a really broad population and bring it into the U.S. with full knowledge of what it can do. So that's why.
Excellent. So why is your placebo number so low in your phase 3 data?
So we're very careful. We screened out patients who would respond to placebo. When you take a lubricating drop of your choice and you put it in someone's eye, if it's a placebo, it doesn't have any active drug in it. It's really just what we call things that are generally regarded as safe and lubricants. If the patients gain 3 lines with that, they're not just suffering from presbyopia. They may be, but they're really suffering from ocular surface disease, and that is what is causing a fair amount of their vision loss. So by screening those folks out, we get a very low placebo response rate once you go ahead and you give them active drop. So it's a screening process to make sure that we're not confounding our data with patients who are ocular surface disease patients and improve with just a lubricant.
Yeah, that's great information. Thank you. With dosing for this product, what does the dosing look like? I know optometrists is going to ask, that question when, compared to other.
So we've spent a fair amount of time, years, to A, to B, to C trials, trying to formulate this drug so that basically you take it once, it's a once a day dosing. You get approximately 10 hours of the effect. It does tend to wear off towards the end, 10, 11, maybe 12 hours, but it's a really formulation designed so that you have once a day dosing, which we consider very important for patients. These are active patients, ages 45 to 75. They're in the prime of their lives. And, you know, they don't want to be bothered at 1:30 in the afternoon or noon putting in another drop to be able to see. So as a critical lifestyle drug, we really thought once a day dosing was important. And we formulated this both in the percentage and the actual formulation so that it can be used once a day and provide really good near vision for the majority of the working day.
Yeah. No, that's very important. I mean, you know, active lifestyle, you know, patients that want to drop something like this don't want to be inconvenienced per se to, at, you know, the middle of the day to do so. So I think that's important. How are you able to keep the pupil so small for 10 hours long?
Well, that's really the critical work that was done, identifying the percentage and the slow absorption to make sure that we get it in so that we really hit all the receptors on the iris sphincter. You know, once we identified it, that it really spared the ciliary muscle and was focused on the M3 receptors that were on the iris, then we had to make sure that it really stayed in activity. And that was one of the tricks of our formulation. I mean, it is what we spent a lot of time figuring out, in addition to what's the right percentage. In Europe, it was 2% that was used 4 times a day. Now, that's great for keeping the pupil small, but very few patients want to be bothered, as I mentioned, by using this drug even twice a day. So we had to come up with a very specific formulation that washed over the ocular surface and provided extended duration. and that had to be done at a percentage where we hit what we thought was a very specific sweet spot. When you look at the Raleigh curves for the depth of focus, it's very clear once you get below 2 millimeters that you have a really significant increase in the depth of focus. And that's where we want it to be, below 2, somewhere between 1.5 and 2. And that's pretty consistent with a lot of different pinhole apertures for the eye. That 1.5 to 2 millimeters is really a sweet spot. And it provides really good depth of focus so that subjects, patients can sit, they can read, they can look at their handheld devices and not need distance correction. Additionally, because our drug really is not touching the ciliary muscle, we're not inducing myopia. So you can have a broad range of patients who are slightly myopic up to 4 diopters, and patients who are hyperopic up to a diopter will benefit from this and not need to go and get a new pair of distance glasses while they're using this. In fact, they may notice a small improvement in their distance vision just by using this. And that's, again, due to the pinhole effect. So it's kind of a perfect drug for both the patients who are presbyopic and who are slightly myopic and a little hyperopic. And we treated patients all the way up to 2 diopters of cylinder. So it really is a huge range, you know, 75 down to 45, -4 to +1 with up to 2 diopters of astigmatism is a very large part of the presbyopic population. It really allows us to treat those patients. Additionally, we also use this on patients who had had either PRK or LASIK, and we used it on patients who were pseudophakic as long as it was a monofocal IOL that was used. So the nice part is we really tried to allow this drug to be used and get a really good idea of its mechanism of action and its effectiveness in a very broad range of patients that you and I see every day walking into our office and saying, hey, you know, I'm tired of wearing the cheaters. I'm tired of 2 pairs of glasses. I'm tired of my transition lenses. Isn't there something I can do where I can just put the drop in and go about my business? The really nice part is also on days they don't want to do it, they don't have to. So it's kind of an ideal formulation for when they're working and probably some of their weekends, but it's a perfectly good use of a miotic as long as it doesn't really cause some of the side effects that we saw with the pilocarpine and carbachol. And for those of us who are old enough, and you can tell by my white hair at this point, the problems with pilocarpine and carbachol chronically are significant when you start to look at patients who were on them for the number of years when in this age range when it was used for glaucoma. So hopefully this is a really nice answer for a very large majority of our presbyopes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty excited that we have a broad range for our patients and better solutions and options for our patients, for those presbyopia patients. So I'm going to be hitting it soon. So I don't want to wear reading glasses. Still want to.
Yeah, I'm well beyond. I'm into the final decade, and I will tell you, it's can't come fast enough for me. That's for sure.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm excited. When do you expect to file an NDA, product launch? Are we going to get samples?
Yeah. All good questions, and you know, let me try and tick them off one by one. So we expect the NDA to be filed during the middle of 2024, and possible approval. And again, it's always dependent on the questions that the FDA has and our answers, and making sure we have all the data so that we can sufficiently answer their questions. But probably as early as 2025, we might see approval. So it's coming pretty fast, which is great. And regarding samples, you bet. You know, it's super important for us to make sure that both patients and doctors know what this drug does, and the best way to do that is to sample it. So, yep, all those are, you know, great questions, and we intend to make sure that people understand this drug and use it, and have a good understanding of what it can do. The really nice feature to this drug is that it works within about 15 minutes. So if you put a drop in a patient's eye and they're sitting there, within 15 minutes, a large portion of them are going to be able to look at their iPhones and read them. They couldn't read them before. And that's a very, very important part of this. We wanted to make sure that we got that pupil down quickly enough so that patients could sit in your waiting room or just literally go put a drop in and really see well and see what it feels like. So, you know, I think we have a really good answer. We've spent a lot of time making sure that we had the right percentage and the right formulation.
Yeah. I noticed in your study that there was a significant improvement in distance vision. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I think a lot of doctors were concerned about, you know, distance vision.
So, you know, it's a very, very important question. When you give a patient a drop and improve their near vision, you really want to make sure that they maintain their distance vision. Now, we had a statistically significant improvement in distance vision. In fact, the requirement for our trial was the patients had to be about 20/25 or better. So it's pretty hard to improve a lot from there, but we did see statistically significant improvements. And the reason is because those patients have now a pinhole effect, so they're getting rid of some of their higher order aberrations, and they're also not having a change in their distance prescription because we're not moving the iris lens diaphragm forward because we're not touching the ciliary muscle. So the mechanism of action we understand, but also the fact that they are now getting a little better distance vision was appreciated by a significant number of patients. So as you know, being able to put the drop in and not have to go change your distance prescription is really a godsend. And so I think we're going to be very, very pleased with what patients see and report to us when they use this drug.
How many sites do you have, you know, doing trials?
We ran 3 trials concurrently. We ran 2 trials that looked at the efficacy of the drug and 1 safety trial, which ran out for 6 months. And that was about 37 sites total. So it was a pretty large study. We had also a PK study that was, so it was really actually 4 studies at once. They happened to all end. Well, they didn't happen. We planned them to all end almost at the same time. So it really turned out very well. We were very fortunate in having really phenomenal sites that were able to recruit. And I think it's very telling because, as you know, this trial went on for quite some time, and we had some of the COVID issues and other problems that we have in recruiting, but there's so many presbyopes that wanted to try this that we were very fortunate in being able to enroll this trial very efficiently.
Yeah. No, I think a lot of doctors, when they saw the results, were very excited. And then just hearing more about it now, I mean, just did a webinar on, presbyopia drops with Dr. Barnett last week. There was so many questions after. Doctors are excited. They're looking for the latest and greatest for the patients because patients are asking us for it, right? People want the fountain of youth, and they can get it with a presbyopia
time.
drop.
It's absolutely amazing, again, and it's not that they can't get their cheaters and they have all those options, but this is a wonderful option when you can wake up in the morning, put the drop in, and literally go about your business all day long, and even go into dinner time and read a menu. I mean, that's phenomenal. That's basically turning the clock back. And I can tell you as a 65-year-old doctor, I'd love that. There's nothing I wouldn't give to be able to just wake up and not reach for something and have to go read something with a pair of glasses on. So I think it's a really important quality of life issue for a lot of patients.
No, yeah, it's super important, especially where everyone's on their screens. I mean, I'm guilty of it too, on it every day for long periods of time. I'm even embarrassed to admit on this podcast. But I mean, everyone's on it. So I think it's going to be a game changer for us and have an extra tool in our toolbox. One of the questions that keeps popping up with drops like this is, will doctors have to do a retinal exam to RX this? What is your recommendation?
I always think you should. I think whenever you prescribe any drug that has any effects, meaning pupil effects, I think it's always a good idea. You want to know what's going on behind.
Yeah, no, I think that's important advice because that question always comes up when prescribing drops like this and doctors, Nick. But I think this is going to be a great opportunity. We're going to see a lot of new patients. So I think we've seen it before coming to our office. This is going to be able to have patients continue to come every year. Maybe the patients that didn't get an eye exam every year, patients who are just going over the counter self-prescribing. So I think it is a win for optometry as well, and eye care in general, and just being able to, even if they're not candidates, better health checks, diagnosing more disease and saving eyes.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you that this will bring patients into our offices. All the emmetropes who are running around, or the low myopes who say, oh, I can still drive, and they say, but boy, wouldn't it be nice? I can just love to read my iPhone or my GPS in my car or whatever it is. There are so many things in our lives now that require near, intermediate, and distance vision, and having an active population as we do. This is really phenomenal when you can put the drop in, have really minimal effect, if anything, a little improvement on your distance vision, but to gain 3 lines, 4 lines. I mean, patients were crazy about how happy they were with this drug. Our patient-reported outcomes identified that there were really 90% said they noticed a very quick improvement in their near vision. It was really phenomenally positive when you look at the patient-reported outcomes in addition. So I fully agree with you. I think this will bring patients in. As eye care professionals, we all are responsible for making sure we understand those eyes, identifying who's a good candidate. Not everybody. We're very, very upfront about this. This isn't, a panacea. You throw it at everybody. You know that this is a drug that is going to work in the vast majority of presbyopes. And you'll have some watch-outs. You're going to say, oh, wait, you have a posterior subcapsular cataract. This isn't a great drug for you. So I really do expect that our education, and all the work we did in the long-term study, the short-term study, and really understanding this drug will bring it into the marketplace with a very clear idea of who this is a good drug for. Just happens it's going to be good for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm excited. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing the latest technology in eye care. And I'm excited to see when this comes out to be able to give it to my patients. And I'm sure a lot of doctors that are listening to this podcast would love more information. Is there a website that they can read the phase 3 data or get more information to sign up, maybe get latest updates?
Sure. LENZ Therapeutics, but we shorten it to LENZTX for Therapeutics. And if you just look up LENZ, it will come right up. And you can see our phase 3 data. There are 13 slides on there that identify all this information. And right now we're doing a deep dive and getting everything ready for NDA. So we're very focused on really mining our existing phase 3 data and making sure that all the different parts of this data set are understood well, and whatever further information we can to make sure that when this drug does come to market, it's well understood and well communicated to our eye care professionals.
Well, thank you so much again. I think the listeners really got a great insight on the latest technology.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.